The global wheat market is undergoing a dramatic shift, one that is sending ripples through economies and agricultural communities around the world. What was once a stable and predictable system is now being upended by a complex web of political and economic forces. For decades, the United States stood as the undisputed leader in wheat exports, supplying nations across the globe and shaping the very foundation of international grain trade. American wheat was a symbol of reliability and abundance. But today, that dominance is being challenged. Increasingly, American wheat shipments are being turned away at foreign ports, not because of any drop in quality, but due to the mounting pressures of an escalating economic conflict. As U.S. wheat faces rejection and uncertainty, Canada is stepping in to fill the void. Canadian wheat, once a secondary player, is now in high demand, especially in the massive and lucrative Chinese market. Chinese importers, eager to secure stable supplies, are turning to Canada as their new preferred partner. Canadian farmers are seizing this unprecedented opportunity. They are rapidly building new trade relationships, expanding their export infrastructure, and investing in technology to meet the surge in global demand. For many, this is a chance to grow their businesses and secure a stronger future for their communities. This isn't just a simple change in consumer preference, it's a fundamental realignment of global trade routes and supply chains. Shipping lanes are being redrawn, and the flow of grain is shifting in ways that will have long-term consequences for producers and consumers alike. At the heart of this upheaval lies the ongoing US-China trade war. Tariffs and retaliatory measures have made American wheat prohibitively expensive for Chinese buyers, forcing them to look elsewhere. The result is a dramatic reshaping of the global wheat market, with new winners and losers emerging. In this chapter, we'll explore how this conflict unfolded, why Canada is thriving in this new environment, and what these changes mean for the future of North American wheat. The story of wheat is no longer just about farming, it's about geopolitics, economics, and the shifting balance of power on the world stage. The wheat crisis is rooted in years of US-China economic tension. What began as a series of disagreements over trade imbalances and intellectual property has evolved into a complex standoff, with agriculture, especially wheat, at the center of the storm. The relationship between these two economic giants has always been fraught with competition, but recent years have seen a dramatic escalation. The US has long accused China of unfair trade practices, including currency manipulation, forced technology transfers, and heavy subsidies for domestic industries. These accusations have fueled a cycle of tariffs and retaliation, with each side imposing new barriers in response to the other's moves. What started as targeted tariffs on select goods quickly spiraled into a broader economic conflict. In response to US tariffs on Chinese goods, China targeted American agriculture, especially wheat, with steep tariffs. Wheat, a staple crop and a symbol of American farming, became a pawn in this high-stakes game. Chinese importers, once major buyers of US wheat, suddenly faced prohibitive costs, forcing them to look elsewhere. This tit-for-tat escalation has created a full-scale trade war, with agriculture caught in the crossfire. Farmers who once relied on stable export markets now face uncertainty and shrinking demand. The ripple effects extend far beyond the farm, impacting rural economies, shipping industries, and global food prices. As of early 2025, US tariffs hit a century high, while China imposed a blanket 125% tariff on most US imports, with even higher rates for key crops. These unprecedented measures have made it nearly impossible for American wheat to compete in the Chinese market, and the effects are being felt across the entire supply chain. The result: international buyers now see the US as an unstable supplier. The unpredictability of tariffs and the threat of sudden policy changes have made American wheat a risky bet for importers around the world. Unpredictable tariffs and political risk have eroded trust, making buyers wary of relying on American wheat. Many have begun to question whether the US can be counted on to deliver consistent, affordable supplies in the future. Many are diversifying their sources, fundamentally altering global supply chains. Countries that once depended on US wheat are now forging new partnerships with suppliers in Australia, Canada, Russia, and even parts of Eastern Europe. This shift is not just about price, it's about stability and reliability in a volatile world. Even if tensions ease, these new relationships may outlast the conflict. Once trust is broken and new supply chains are established, it can take years or even decades for old trading patterns to return. The damage to US credibility as a reliable supplier could be long-lasting. For American farmers and exporters, the challenge now is not just to weather the current storm, but to rebuild trust and adapt to a new, more competitive global marketplace. The most devastating blow came when China imposed a 140% tariff on U.S. wheat. This instantly doubled the price, making American wheat uncompetitive. Chinese buyers canceled orders and turned to other suppliers like Canada and Australia. U.S. grain shipments to China plummeted by 57% in a single year. Proposed U.S. shipping levies on Chinese vessels added further uncertainty, discouraging trade. The result, a near-total freeze of U.S. wheat exports to China. Chinese importers are now signing long-term contracts with other countries. The longer this lasts, the harder it will be for U.S. exporters to regain lost ground. The 140% tariff is a stark example of how political disputes can devastate entire industries overnight. The trade war isn't the only reason for falling U.S. wheat exports. China has invested heavily in its own agriculture, achieving record wheat and maize harvests in 2024. With full granaries, China's need for imports has dropped sharply. Grain imports fell 51% year over year. This self-sufficiency gives Beijing more leverage in trade disputes. Domestic surpluses push prices down, making imports even less attractive. For U.S. exporters, this means not just losing market share but facing a shrinking market overall. The convergence of tariffs and reduced demand has created a worst-case scenario for American farmers. Regaining a foothold in China will be harder than ever. As U.S. wheat is shut out, Canada is reaping the benefits. Canadian wheat, free from punitive tariffs, is now the top choice for Chinese buyers. Canadian farmers are ramping up production and securing long-term contracts. Their high-protein wheat is prized by Chinese millers, making Canada not just a substitute, but a preferred supplier. Stable trade relations and predictable policies make Canada a reliable partner. The result: booming business for Canadian agriculture with increased incomes and jobs across the prairies. While U.S. farmers struggle, Canadians are enjoying one of their most profitable periods. The contrast highlights the impact of national trade strategies. American farmers are bearing the brunt of this crisis. With China closed off, they face a wheat surplus and falling domestic prices. Many are forced to sell below cost, risking debt and even foreclosure. The emotional toll is immense. Farmers feel powerless, caught in a political battle far beyond their control. Some are considering planting less wheat or switching crops, but alternatives are limited and risky. Other agricultural sectors like dairy and soybeans are suffering under similar tariffs. The pain is widespread and the future uncertain. Farmers hope for a resolution, but each day of lost sales deepens the damage. Recovery will be slow, even if trade relations improve. The trade war's impact ripples through the entire supply chain. Grain elevators, railways, and shipping companies all suffer from reduced exports. With fewer shipments to China, freight rates have plummeted, hurting the shipping industry. The Baltic Panamax Index dropped 41% in a year, reflecting the slowdown. Port operators and logistics firms face layoffs and lost revenue. Proposed shipping levies add more uncertainty, making U.S. exports less attractive. Buyers increasingly turn to Canada and Australia, where logistics are simpler and more predictable. The trade war is clogging the arteries of global commerce, not just closing markets. This disruption could permanently reshape North American agriculture, altering the landscape for generations to come. The ripple effects of these changes will be felt not only by farmers, but by entire rural communities, whose livelihoods depend on wheat production and export. As the global market adapts, North American wheat will face new challenges and opportunities that could redefine its role in the world. The longer tariffs and trade barriers remain in place, the more deeply rooted new trade patterns become. Exporters and importers are forced to seek out alternative partners, forging new relationships that may outlast the current political climate. Shipping routes are reconfigured, and logistical networks are rebuilt to accommodate these shifts, making it increasingly difficult to return to the old ways of doing business. Chinese buyers, now developing strong ties with Canadian suppliers, may find little incentive to return to U.S. wheat even if tariffs are eventually lifted. Trust and reliability built over years of partnership can outweigh short-term price advantages. Canadian wheat, having proven its quality and consistency, could become the new standard for Chinese mills and bakeries, further cementing Canada's position in the Asian market. For American farmers, the pressure to adapt is mounting. Many are already exploring alternative crops such as soybeans, corn, or specialty grains, hoping to find new sources of income. This shift may lead to a permanent reduction in U.S. wheat acreage, as farmers diversify to survive in a more uncertain global market. The transition is not easy, requiring new knowledge, equipment, and access to different markets. For Canada, this is a rare opportunity to solidify its status as a global agricultural powerhouse. With increased demand from Asia and other regions, Canadian wheat farmers are poised to expand production and invest in new technologies. The country's reputation for high-quality grain could open doors to even more lucrative markets, boosting rural economies and supporting a new era of growth. Investment in infrastructure, such as grain storage and transportation, will likely follow. Governments and private companies may also prioritize signing new trade agreements to secure long-term access to key markets. These strategic moves will help ensure that Canadian wheat remains competitive on the world stage, even as global dynamics continue to shift. Ultimately, the future of both countries' wheat industries will hinge on political decisions made in Washington and Beijing. Trade negotiations, tariff policies, and diplomatic relations will all play a critical role in shaping the path forward for North American wheat. If the trade war continues, the gap between U.S. and Canadian fortunes will only widen. American wheat farmers may face declining profits and shrinking communities, while their Canadian counterparts experience growth and prosperity. The contrast could become a defining feature of the North American agricultural landscape. In this new reality, farmers must prepare for a future that looks very different from the past. Embracing innovation, seeking out new markets, and adapting to changing global conditions will be essential for survival. The choices made today will shape the destiny of North American wheat for decades to come. The U.S.-China wheat dispute is a powerful reminder of how quickly global trade can shift. A 140% tariff has walled off American wheat, while Canada thrives. China's record harvests and reduced import needs compound the crisis for U.S. exporters. The entire supply chain, from farmers to shippers, feels the pain. For U.S. farmers, finding new markets will be a long, difficult process. For Canadians, the challenge is to sustain their newfound momentum. The hope is for a return to stable, open trade, but for now, the future remains uncertain.